lockdown drills seriously. In 2017, two 16-year-olds were in their school bathroom when the lights suddenly went out and their school went into lockdown. Feeling rebellious, they decide, you know what, let's go explore the school a little bit first, and then we'll go follow procedure. They step out of the bathroom and look down the hall towards their classroom, and they see this large figure standing in front of their classrooms. It's definitely not a student, it's not a teacher. He's got ragged clothes on and he starts walking towards them. They dart right back into the bathroom to the corner stall where they hide, praying that man didn't see them. The man bursts in and starts yanking open all the stalls. Not wanting to see what happens when he gets to their stall, they get on the ground and start crawling to the side of the room where they finally get up and make a run for the door. They look back and he's holding a gun. The boys manage to get away safely and no one's hurt, but the police never capture the ragged man.
So it's Friday night, it's Roxy's birthday weekend, and we're all going to her house for the first time ever for our group sleepover. So we get there, and honestly, everything seemed really normal at first. Roxy's house was really nice, and honestly, I was confused why she never wanted us there before. So then we start making banana bread, and all of a sudden, Laura jumps and screams and runs to the other side of the kitchen. She's like, "Did you guys feel that?" And we're all like, "What are you talking about, Laura?" She's like, "I swear something just touched my lower back." And Laura's face turned really pale, like she was genuinely scared, and we spend the next hour convincing her that no one was there, no one touched her back. So then we start watching a movie, Disturbia. Shout out to Shia LaBeouf. And Nina goes to the bathroom. And when she comes back, she's like, "Roxy, it looks like something upstairs is maybe leaking because there's this massive wet stain on your bathroom wall." And Roxy's like, "Oh, don't worry, that stain's always there." She's like, "We actually can't figure out where it's coming from. We've had plumbers come and they can't figure it out either. There's no drain or pipe or anything that could be causing a leak at that part of the house anyway." And then Roxy says, "But that's why we think our house is haunted." We all look at her kind of shocked and she's like, "Yeah, that's why I never invited you guys to sleep over because it can get kind of creepy." But honestly, at that point, I wasn't that creeped out until we went to bed because that's when stuff started getting weird. So it's Friday night.
I am going to be telling you a scary childhood story. When I was 2 years old, my mom passed away. My dad wasn't in the picture, so I went to go live with my grandparents. My grandparents lived in a super old home that was built in the 1800s. I was a very imaginative child. So when I told my grandparents that I used to see people in the house, they just didn't believe me. There was one lady in particular that I would always see. She would sit at the end of my bed and watch me fall asleep. I wasn't scared of her because I thought she was an actual person. Plus, I was super little, so nothing even crossed my mind. At this point, I was like 4 or 5 years old. I remember her talking to me constantly. She even sang me the song Rockabye Baby to get me to go to bed one night. Every single day when I would get home, I could see her in my window. At that point, I thought she was just waiting for me. She just wanted to be my friend, right? But as I got older, things started to get really weird between me and her. She wasn't this nice lady anymore. Stay tuned for part 2.
This is why you should never Google yourself. Anora Petrova became obsessed with constantly refreshing a website that predicted whether or not she would win her ice skating competitions. But things took an extreme turn when she decided to manipulate the website's predictions by editing it herself. This caused her to be banned from the competition and be dropped by her trainer. But things got so much worse when she refreshed the page again and saw a terrifying message about her. This time it said she would be an orphan. She immediately called her parents, but she only heard maniacal laughter over the phone. After her parents died of a terrible accident, the police said that there were no records of her calls to her parents at all. She became reclusive after that and moved to another country, where she tried to reinvent herself. Eventually, she stopped checking the website and things went back to normal, until she wanted to audition for the Ice Circus. She checked the website again to see whether or not she would make it, but it only said one thing. It said, at midnight, Anora Petrova died friendless and alone. The next day, her body was found next to her computer. This is why if you've ever thought about getting your ears pierced, don't do what she did. This is the urban legend about a girl in Japan who tried to do it, then ended up with horrifying consequences. So this young girl really wanted to get her ears pierced. After some pleading with her parents, they finally agreed and gave her some money to go do it. But instead, the girl kept the money and decided to pierce them herself and let her friend help her. They heated up a large needle and went for it one day. It was painful, but in the end, she was happy she could finally wear earrings. However, this wouldn't last long. One day in school, she felt an intense pain in her left ear. Her earlobe was itchy, and by the end of the day, she had a headache. She went into the bathroom and saw her ear was very inflamed. Then she looked closer and saw a piece of white string sticking out of her new piercing. She picked and pulled at it, which only made the string longer. Now it was hanging out of her earlobe. The string seemed to be endless. The more she pulled, the longer it got. Finally, fed up, she took a pair of scissors and cut the string. Suddenly, everything went black. There was a burning pain in her ears and her eyes. She began to scream. In the hospital, it was revealed that it wasn't a piece of string at all. She had pulled out a piece of her optic nerve and cut it. She would be blind for the rest of her life. If you've ever thought
This is why you should always be scared of clowns. In 2004, a babysitter had just sat down to watch TV before the parents got back when she noticed something. In the corner of the room was a large clown statue that, no matter how she positioned herself, seemed like it was staring right at her. As she's looking at it, the father calls to check in on the kids. She tells him everything is fine, and right before they're about to hang up, she says, "Why do you have a huge clown statue in your TV room?" There was silence on the phone, and then the father just says, "We don't own a clown statue." She immediately drops the phone, runs upstairs, gets the kids, runs outside, calls the cops. Cops go in and come out with this guy. As the police are taking the clown away, one of the officers comes over to the girl and with a very grim look on his face just says, "We found him underneath one of the kids' beds. He was holding a sharpened screwdriver."
Once there was a girl named Jenny. She was like all the other girls except for one thing. She always wore a green ribbon around her neck. There was a boy named Alfred in her class. Alfred liked Jenny, and Jenny liked Alfred. One day he asked her, "Why do you wear that ribbon all the time?" "I cannot tell you," said Jenny. But Alfred kept asking, "Why do you wear it?" And Jenny would say, "It's not important." Jenny and Alfred grew up and fell in love. One day they got married. After their wedding, Alfred said, "Now that we're married, you must tell me why you have that green ribbon." "You must wait," said Jenny. "I will tell you when the right time comes." Years passed. Alfred and Jenny grew old. One day, Jenny became very sick. The doctor told her that she was dying. Jenny called Alfred to her side and said, "Now I can tell you about the green ribbon." She told him to untie it so he could see why. And Jenny's head fell off.
Long ago, there was a witch who lived in a shack deep in the woods. Her name was Mary Worth, and villagers came to her for tinctures and potions when they were sick. However, they started to get wary when young girls started to go missing. She denied any involvement, but it seemed as though the more girls went missing, the younger she looked. One night, a young girl had taken a tincture from Mary Worth for her toothache. However, her parents heard a strange sound outside and found Mary using her wand to what seemed to be suck the life out of this young girl. The villagers rioted and they took Mary Worth and burned her alive. They burned her in front of a mirror so she could see herself die, but before she died, she cursed the mirror and said if anyone were to ever say her name 3 times in front of a mirror, her spirit would return for revenge. Fast forward over 1,000 years, the legend of Bloody Mary is nothing more than a party game. A young girl is dared by her friends to go into the bathroom and she says, "Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary." And there she was. He took her soul and tore her to shreds, burned her soul and trapped her in the mirror for all eternity. Long ago,
This is why you should always save your videos on Snapchat. In a small town in Indiana, Abigail Williams and Liberty German were taking a small hike in the woods. The town the two grew up in was very small, so not much really happened. The two walked the trails as they always would, admiring the trees and having small conversation. They knew Liberty's grandfather would soon pick them up, so they tried not to wander too far. 30 minutes later, Liberty's grandfather arrived at the location, but the girls were nowhere to be found. Panic began to set in because the girls were officially reported missing to the police. Police searched the trails for hours, but nothing turned up. That was until the next morning when both of the girls' lifeless bodies were found inside of a ditch. Detectives turned to social media to see if they could find anything, and what you're about to hear will give you chills. One video they found was Liberty recording a man following them because the two felt uncomfortable. And the audio of the video was even more disturbing than that. Take a listen.
This is why you should never knock on a stranger's door. Once there was a man trying to check into a hotel. The woman at the front desk gave him his key and told him none of the guests are allowed to go into the room across the hall. He agreed, but as he continued to stay in the hotel, he grew more and more curious about the room he wasn't supposed to go in. At one point, he even walked down the hall to that room and tried the door. It was locked. Then he bent down and looked through the keyhole. He saw that it was just the same as his hotel room. But in the corner of the room, there was a woman whose skin was extremely pale, almost a sickly white. Her back was to the wall, so the man didn't see what she looked like. He almost knocked on the door, but then just decided to leave her alone. The next day, he walked past the door again and decided to look into the keyhole. This time, there was no hotel room and no woman. It was all just red. He thought that this seemed really strange, so he went to the front desk and asked about the room. After insisting on an answer, the woman at the front desk told him, "A long time ago, a man killed his wife in that room, and her ghost is still there. But these ghosts are not what you might imagine. They're completely white all over, except for their eyes, which are red." This is
Story time about how my blind date robbed my apartment. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. Recently broke up with my ex who was really abusive. I was so depressed after the breakup. Even worse, my ex got back with his ex-girlfriend right after we broke up. And to top it all off, he started posting her right away and announced their engagement. I decided I wouldn't let the depression get to me. Signed up to some dating apps and started going on dates. My first date was okay. The guy was pretty shy and quiet, but he was trying to rush things, if you know what I mean, and I was not having that. My second date was okay. The only problem was that his breath smelled really bad and I just couldn't get past that. Then I went on to the third date. This one was different though. One of my coworkers mentioned a guy that she knew who was single. She showed him my Instagram and he fell in love, according to my coworker. The only problem was he didn't have any pictures on his Instagram, so I couldn't tell what he looked like. My friend described him though, and she made him sound really attractive. We meet up for a dinner date at a really nice restaurant, and yep, he was super attractive. He literally looked like a male model. I felt totally out of my league, but I thought, whatever, just go for it. We talked for 2 hours and had a great time. At the end of the date, he offered to drop me off back at my place so that I wouldn't have to take an Uber. I agreed, and when we got to my place, I invited him in. Biggest mistake of my life. Oh, I forgot to mention, I earn a pretty good living, so I have a nice apartment and nice things. When he came into my apartment, he kept talking about how pretty everything was. He kept saying things like, wow, that must have been really expensive. He even asked me how much I paid for my rug. Went to the bathroom and left him alone. When I came out, he said he had to leave. Basically ran away. Part 2 is up. Story time about